Hello, welcome to another episode. I am your host, Sacred Walker, self-love queen, here to support you in your self-love, self-care, and success strategies today. So glad to have you joining us. Today will be an amazing episode that I know for a fact will land and resonate with many of you ambitious leaders, those who are excellence driven, and what I like to call the everyday superheroes that you are. Thank you for your commitment to self-care. So one of the big questions that comes up a lot that I often hear that I want to make sure that we completely land on is the things that I wish I knew sooner about healing trauma. And oftentimes these are questions that I realize, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this sooner, and I'm sure you will too. So this podcast is meant to support you towards your well-being. We'll be unlocking unstoppable love in you so that you can deepen self-love, reclaim authentic freedom, and achieve mental clarity and better health. So you can manifest your vision of excellence without the naysayers in the world or the inner critic in your mind blocking your shine. And one of the ways to do that is to look at, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this sooner about what the power of healing trauma in one's life can do, because when she remembered who she was, the game changed. So this show is for educational purposes. If you are seeking deeper support, do reach out to our main office for support from a healthcare professional. And one of our healthcare professionals will be joining us here in a moment, Petra, licensed mental health counselor, licensed mental health social worker, who will be supporting you on your journey ahead. So I want to make sure that if you need that kind of support, deep dive in, make sure that you send a direct message to @AskSacred, and we will be right here for you. Today's show is going to be a jaw dropper. It is going to be focusing in on the things that I wish I knew about healing trauma, and you will too. And Petra has all kinds of big credentials behind her name to support, as do I, to support the answer to this question. There are a lot of major nuggets that are going to help you in this episode today. And I want to make sure that we have a better understanding of our past so that we can build generational well-being and break generational curses so we can level up in our future. And the more that we focus on our self-love and care, we attract what we want, what we deeply desire, when the pain then transforms from our past and becomes our superpower. So in my commitment to empowering 1 million ambitious individuals, executive queens, and high-achieving creatives to break through barriers that have been holding their well-being back to achieve their next level and peak performance, this episode is devoted to you. Self-love and really transforming our understanding of healing our trauma is super important to me, specifically because I am a product of resilience. I've overcome some hardships, and many of us have overcome some hardships. Some traumas can be with a small t, and some traumas can be with a big T, depending on how they've left an imprint in our lives. But why is it so important is the question of the day. I know when I learned about my relationship to healing trauma, it changed my life. When I overcome and face the trauma of the loss of a parent, and overcame the trauma of growing up in a household of domestic violence, and growing up in a household where fighting versus sometimes faith was the fallback, right? Until my mom stepped into her superpower and was able to step into her shine, as was I in that spirit. When I understood the power of understanding your relationship to healing trauma. So learning this helped me in my relationships, learning my understanding of healing trauma and its importance, not just romantic, but my friendships, my team members, my coworkers. It helped me so much that I'm so happy that I can share it with you today. So if you haven't done so already and you want to understand how are you taking care of yourself today, and maybe that relationship of healing trauma might still be leaving a residue, kind of like something that has gotten burnt and there's still a scuff mark there, hop over to selflove.sacredwalker.net/quiz. selflove.sacredwalker.net/quiz to take the self-care assessment. It'll take a few minutes. You'll thank me later. So you've landed here for a reason, and we have Petra joining us today, who's going to be talking about this very subject. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the things that we wish we knew about healing our trauma, and you will too. Petra, you have joined us again. We're so glad to have you here as a part of the Kumba Health Network, as an especially extended family, as a heart-centered person who's showing up today and being able to be someone who can really model the power of healing. So tell me a little bit more about when was the first time you answered that question or understood the relationship to the importance of healing trauma in our lives?
I think I caught the tail end of the question. Would you mind saying the whole question again?
No problem, absolutely. So when you sit with this question of why is understanding the importance of healing trauma, what is that about? When is the first time that you were faced with having to answer that question?
I think the first time, I think it's been a stream in my life. And I think maybe one of the first times I can think about is that I've always been someone who, as a trauma response, I'm like, I don't like people, which is very interesting as like a social worker, a change maker, an organizer, by profession, I'm like, I'm dealing with people all the time, right? But the ways that my trauma showed up was like, oh, I'm going to separate myself from people so that I don't get hurt in that kind of way. And so I remember being a part of this somatics course that was really focused on the body and having to come to that realization that I was like, oh, I don't really believe that. That piece of me that believes that is coming from not a grounded or authentic or like really how I want to show up in the world place. And so I'm like, oh, that's my trauma talking, because I think some of the ways that trauma shows up is that it's really trying to protect us. It's trying to save something. It's trying to keep something out of harm's way. But really that was getting in the way, because what I really craved in that moment, and even now as a human, is really deep connected relationships with people. But it's just one of those tricky ways that our trauma can show up, trauma can show up where we're like, oh, I believe this thing, but we're like, that's not what I want to believe.
Absolutely. I think you're speaking so powerfully to the power of understanding our attachment style, right? Like sometimes if we've had an experience earlier on where we might have had any kind of experience where pulling away was something that reinforced, is it safe to get close? Or there's something that happened. I know for me, I would oscillate between like, I'm actually not going to connect with someone, or I might even push like, oh my gosh, why is that person not speaking to me? Why is that person pulling away? And spending more time trying to focus on the person who's ghosting than spending time on the people who are trying to love on me, because there's that dance. So I think you're really speaking into sometimes when we are creating a distance, it's actually that we're longing for connection. And we might be afraid that it's okay to have connection, or maybe it's a flip side that maybe we've had rejecting experiences growing up. And so we translate that into, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong that caused the person to pull away versus, oh, the person is pulling away based on their own experience. So it sounds like trauma, understanding that, can really impact how we show up and take things to heart in our relationships. And that's what I think I'm hearing some of those gems. So for those who are tuning in right now, I want to make sure that if you are hearing that and you want to take that in, that landed somewhere in you, I want to make sure that we resonate that, because for those who are frequenters of our show, those of us who know here at Kumba Health, we really value culturally responsive approaches of care. And so I think you're speaking into, what does it mean when you come from a community where it may or may not have been safe to open up, that might have been taken for granted? What does it look like when you need to be connected with an amazing therapist such as Petra, who can help you to understand those responses so that you show up differently? I want to take a pause here and say, we talk a lot about big stuff on the show, or whether you're tuning in today, ready for a tune-up, you're feeling like, oh, this is cracking me open, I didn't sign up for this. Guess what? You're here for a purpose, right? So we want to make sure that we're going to give you some strategies so you can be unstoppable. But the deeper work, the transformational work and change works when you partner with someone like Petra, who can really help you do those deeper dives. And if you want to have an opportunity to connect with other like-minded folks, hop on over to Facebook and hop on into the Love and Level Up group so that we can support you to shine. So those of us who are joining in, I want to make sure that we continue in this conversation. And if you want a consultation, feel free to send a direct message so that we can connect with you and go from there. So for many of our listeners who are tuning in, who are moving through divorces, who are moving through losses of maybe a parent, or maybe they either lost a job or they got a promotion. Something is may get triggered in change. Change triggers things, and it's, oh my gosh, like the change can trigger our trauma. So can you talk a little bit about an experience that you've had where you've seen change pick something up, or all of a sudden, is it okay to be close to people, or actually I'm going to just ghost and push people away because I don't want people to know I'm going through a change? Can you speak into any examples of how people, either you have experienced change or others, that you feel like it's important to know your trauma in this situation?
Yeah, I can think of one, and I'll share this one because I think it's also like I think all of the named are big things. And I think it may be easier in a kind of way when a big thing happens for us to take a note and be like, oh, there might be something going on here. But I want to name something that's like, that for me was like a big thing, but it might be teeny tiny to someone who may be experiencing it. And so I remember when me and my partner got closer in our relationship, we decided we're going to move in together. And I had the biggest issue with the furniture and the way that she wanted to move furniture around. And this is like, it's not a big deal. And like the logical sense of the word, it's not a big deal. And so, but me and being able to talk to my therapist and have someone to talk to, she was able to figure out that she's like, well, it's kicking up a lot of things. Is it's like you are in your own space, right? And so I think it's also like in relationship to change that you are used to something. And now, even if it's a change that you want, promotion, new relationship, I was happy. And I was like, yes, look at us like getting onto this new level. And still I was like, there's some resistance here. And I'm like, I know that it's a weird feeling to have this resistance, and I feel really dedicated to the resistance. And so having that acknowledgement of like, oh, there's some tension here, and I'm not sure why I'm struggling with this particular thing. And so we were able to see that, like, when it's around that there is someone else is coming into your space, like, where are some other moments where someone else came into your space? And what was the impact of that? Was it a good experience? Was it a difficult experience? Was it within, outside of that spectrum? So that you're not, for me, it's really important not to gaslight myself, to think like, oh, this is just wild. Like, this makes no sense, right? But instead, really taking a pause is someone that folks can do with a support person, or folks have the capacity to do it alone. But taking a pause and say, what are the similarities between what I'm going through and what has happened to me in the past? So that's a way that we can leverage that wisdom that we could bring to our current selves, and it can help just put stuff into context, right? So it's not just like, particularly when now I need to have this conversation with my partner to be like, I'm really having a difficult time. Therapy was really helpful to kind of demonstrate what those things were. Can we have a conversation so we can figure out, that you have a better understanding of why I'm having such a hard time, so that we can be kinder to each other during this change, which I think is the biggest thing that I would offer, that like change is going to be difficult for a variety of reasons. But like, if we can have a little bit more kindness and a little bit more compassion with ourselves and whoever it is that we're engaged in that change, it makes all the difference. And I think that's the part that really creates the healing. It's like, when can we redo, in a sense, an experience, something that happened in the past that we didn't want to go a particular way, and how can we make it anew? And like, and how do we solidify that's the potential, and having that to be like, oh, another story that's also true.
What I appreciate about what I'm hearing you say is that self-awareness, that insight, right? That, there's a long held African diasporic tradition of the power of insight, right? Like, insight is bringing sight within, like being able to look within and go, am I talking about A, or am I really upset about B? I think there's some power in how you are able to, I'm hearing a gem dropper of, be able to bring that into your relationship. So you're modeling that very gem of the power of healing trauma. So when you show up so powerfully in conversation where you're maybe supporting a couple and you're hearing what's happening there, and you're like, oh, you're talking about moving the furniture, but what is coming up around, was home always sturdy for you? Or did you feel like, wait, this needs to be one thing and this thing now needs to look differently? This brings into conversation a recent conversation I had with a couple that I was working with, and something similar came up. And it turns out that there were things that were getting kicked up around trauma from the past, around feeling like, I want to feel like home has always been a place of safety and security for one person, and I want to know where things are. That's my thing. And for someone else, it was actually, for me, home was always very unsturdy. So for you to pick something up and now I can't find it reminds me of X, Y, and Z that I moved through. And so now, instead of being angry with you and you're like, well, why are you mad? I just moved the toothbrush. Now it's like we can bring in that vulnerability, right? We can actually draw closer versus pushing each other away. And how many relationships can be saved if you actually knew what you were talking about? It's like I'm speaking to the right. And so there's a phrase that recently came to me, which was the power of saying, am I mistaking you for your wound? It's like, this is the wound and this is you. And this doesn't, like, if I can speak to the wound with love, I won't be like, you're such a control freak. There's something sensitive here. So we can be on that journey with other people. So just for those who are tuning in, if you're like, oh my gosh, this is registering for me, or is that why I move stuff around, or is that why I get irritated? Be aware, be able to tune in to what, some of the gem droppers are. So I want to take a quick break to talk about the solution of looking at why is it important to understand and what happened when, oh my gosh, I realized the power of understanding what healing trauma would do in my life. And this is a topic that you, Petra, proposed for us to talk about for today. I want to admit, if you're someone who's like walking a mile in the shoes, you can relate to this. I want you to subscribe below. I want you to comment. If you want to say, okay, you have a friend that you can relate to that went through this, or maybe you're talking to a sister friend, you want to tag them, or a brother friend, or gender non-conforming friend, tag them below. But we all know what it feels like to be stressed out, but wondering, why am I reacting this way? Why am I reacting this way? And working with a therapist or a coach can help you to figure out, is this stress really based in the moment? Or is it something that's from the past? So just if we take a moment now for the Love and Level Up members who are joining us, who really want to transform their pain to power, who really want to transform barriers to well-being, what would be something that you would say would be a tip that you would give? In addition to being able to reach out and connect with you, to receive coaching, to receive therapy, to do that deeper work so you can have that self-awareness and really have success in the world, what would you say would be one or two tips to really be able to, when you're asking yourself that question, like, why is this important? Where would you even begin if you're not even aware that you're moving the toothbrush because of X, Y, and Z? Where do you even begin, and what is a tip that you might give to someone who is registering with this? Where do they even start, you think?
Yeah, I think it's like what you said in the noticing piece, right? That I think if someone is listening and they are like, that's me, or they're like, if you may be curious, you're like, I'm not sure if that's me, but I would invite you to challenge yourself a little bit and just notice like how you respond in the next disagreement or attention, or maybe something that makes your body frazzled a little bit. Just take a moment and see like, what was the cause of that thing? How did I receive it? We want to listen to the body's wisdom and see like, oh, if I wanted to fight, or I felt tense, or like I wanted to run away in that moment, or maybe you did run away, right? And just taking a moment and seeing, do I want to respond like that? But I think that's really the crux of it for me. That's like, can I see what kicked it? Can I notice how I responded automatically? Because we're all going to have, because trauma gives us an automatic ways so we will respond to particular things, but then really asking the question, is that how I want to respond? And I think if the response to that question is like, no, I don't want to do that, then I'm like, I think that will tune in, continue to learn, get engaged. I think that's the moment that we can actually do something about it, right? But just really beginning to notice. And I think really the piece around slowing down, that I think part of it is that if we're like, oh, we're just having a bad day, but if we just slow down and we notice like, oh, it's been a bad week, it's been a bad month, it's been a bad season, then I'm like, oh, what are the common themes in that? And again, if you're not used to slowing down or paying attention to this, having someone to support you in that, to kind of reflect on it and really putting the light on it is going to be helpful. But just like slowing down and just beginning to notice. And it might this might go into one little part of your brain, but just hold that. I'm like, let me just notice at a moment and think about like, do I want to respond that way? And I think if your answer is no, then it's time to get curious around like, where's that coming from? It might be trauma, might not be trauma, but it could be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you are someone who is at a place where you're at scratch and you're like, I don't even know how to slow down, we have a DIY workbook called Pleasure Principle that can help you to tune in and really center yourself so that you can tune into like, do I even deserve to slow down? Like, do I even deserve to have a moment to get clarity? And then once you use that tool, or you can get to that place, and you're like, I've slowed down and something about this is feeling off. Or even better, something comes up and you realize actually someone else's response, maybe they're pulling away, maybe they're distant, maybe they're reacting, and you feel like the reaction is stronger than the moment, and something about it is kicking something up inside of you. Those are signs, right, that there's something there, right, when we bring awareness. And so there can be really some power in unlocking something in you and being able to reach out and say, you know what, I am ready for this next chapter. And you might feel like shouting it from the rooftops, like, enough! And that's okay, or you might feel like going within, but either way, being able to say, you know what, I am ready to reach out and work with a coach, work with a therapist so that I can feel more aligned. Because there can be something really powerful about feeling like something is off and I'm not quite myself, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're in another chapter of your life and you're rediscovering who you are, right? You can be going from one phase to the next. So we're here to support you with your self-love, self-care, success strategies so that you can really transform moments of a painful past that might still be showing up, right? And so that you can become unstoppable and make that your superpower. So with that spirit, we've had some gems here today. We've had the gem of centering ourselves to get clear. We've had the gem of sometimes I pull away, right? And I might ghost or I might create space, but I actually kind of want you close. Or sometimes I might lash out and move from this place, but technically I need some space to get clear on what is this really about, right? So we're moving from different ways that we actually want. And a third gem dropper is making sure that you can reach out and say, you know what, something about this is needing more clarity. Why don't I get support from Petra or another coach here so that we can really make sure that we support you to shine. So listeners tuning in who are ready for that clarity, who want that additional step so that you can have that person who feels like a friend hand in hand with you so that you can support you to unlock something in you that no longer creates sabotage, toxic stress so that you can shine. Do reach out, direct message us at Ask Sacred, or you can go ahead to Kuumba Health Institute, Kuumba Health Institute, to be able to connect with one of our amazing, amazing coaches. So I am so glad that you were able to join with us today. I am obviously completely obsessed with Petra in a good way, okay? Not obsessive, compulsive, impressed, but definitely like connected. And so if you can, before we go, leave any final words for those who are tuning in, ready for their tune-up, who've lasted to the end of the session, which means that they're extra committed to self-care, self-success. Are there any final words in regards to our topic today, Petra?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I would add is just the benefit, right? That I think that one of my friends who's a mental health counselor was saying that when you do therapy or counseling, like it's going to get much harder and a lot messier before it gets better, which I'm like is true. But thinking about like during those moments where it gets muddy, that the payoff is having the kind of relationships where you could like share openly and honestly about where you are, how you're feeling, making requests in a way that you don't feel like a burden, that you can say it with more agency and pow in your voice, and also being able to listen to that and receive that from other people, that like folks that are gravitated to your work care about the relationships that they have, how they show up, and the ways that they are impacting the world. And I'm like, therapy is a strategy. It's a way to get there, or counseling or support of this kind of sort is a way to get there. I want to name that around like a benefit. It's just like the kinds of relationships that you're able to have after this that I'm just like, unreal.
Absolutely. So thank you for that final jaw dropper. Like if you're tuning in, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm ready for clarity. I feel muddled. I'm ready for clarity. I'm ready to show up really confidently. I'm hearing you speaking to. Like, how can I show up with that oomph, right? And I'm hearing something around like clear relationships. Like, how do I feel clear in my relationships? She feel like I'm getting the love that I want versus pushing it away, right?
Yeah.
Like, being able to tune into that. And so if you've made it to the end of the episode, as I've mentioned, you are truly committed to transformation. You're truly committed to being unstoppable in your life. And you're truly committed to being the love medicine the world is ready for, because you are the answer to your ancestors' prayers. We are truly proud of you here. We want to send you some love. And just making sure that you go ahead and connect with us at Ask Sacred. Go ahead and schedule your appointments at Ask Sacred. Go ahead and hop on over to our group and make sure that you join, and make sure that you comment below. We really want to hear from you. What did you enjoy about this episode? What do you want to hear more of? That's so important to us. So we here wish you self-love, inner peace, and support so that you can become unstoppable. Peace, y'all. Have a beautiful day. Live, love, and be well.